Well, so far, the only bit of hope that's come out of this Davos conference this year is from the Icelandic president, who's standing alongside me, Ólafur Ragnar Grímsson. Mr. President, why are you such a beacon of hope? Why has Iceland survived where Europe has failed? What are you doing differently?
I think it surprises a lot of people that 4 years ago we were exhibit number one of a failed financial system. But now we are back on recovery with economic growth and very little unemployment. And I think the primary reason is that we were wise enough to realize this was also a fundamental social and political crisis. But above all, we didn't follow the traditional prevailing orthodoxies of the Western world in the last 30 years. We introduced currency controls, we let the banks fail, we provided support for the poor, we didn't introduce austerity measures of the scale you're seeing here in Europe. And the end result, 4 years later, is that Iceland is enjoying progress and recovery very different from the other European countries that suffered from the financial crisis.
But with your policy of letting the banks fail, would that have worked for the rest of Europe?
I think so, because as I'm often asked people, why do they consider the banks to be the holy churches of the modern economy? Why are private banks, not like airlines and telecommunication companies, allowed to go bankrupt if they have been conducted in an irresponsible way? The theory that you have to bail out banks is a theory about bankers enjoying for their own profit the success and then letting ordinary people bear the failure through taxes and austerity. And people in enlightened democracies are not going to accept that in the long run.
It wouldn't work for the UK with their reliance on the financial sector, though, would it?
Well, this is an interesting question, because one thing we learned after the collapse of the banks in Iceland, that the Icelandic banks, like the British and the Americans and other banks, have in fact become high-tech companies, hiring engineers, mathematicians, computer scientists. And when they failed, the innovative sectors of our economy, the IT sector, the high-tech sector, in fact blossomed and have been doing much better in the last 3 years than ever before. So the lesson of that is that if you want your economy to be competitive in the innovative sector of the 21st century, a strong financial sector that takes the talent from these sectors, even a successful financial sector, is in fact bad news if you want your economy to be competitive in the areas which really are the 21st century areas: innovation, technology, IT.
President Grímsson, thank you very much.
I wanted to ask you a question. We are at the heart of the Western discussions here in Davos, and at the same time you have the UK Prime Minister, David Cameron, doing a speech about maybe leaving the EU. What do you think? What's your reaction to that? How does it make you feel?
Well, I have no particular feelings about it. It's a political fact that there's widespread and growing skepticism in the United Kingdom about the advantages of European Union membership, especially regarding the evolution of Europe. So I think the speech is simply reflecting a deep and profound political reality within the United Kingdom. This is not a personal exercise on behalf of the Prime Minister.
Don't you think it's going to isolate the UK? Does the UK want to be like Switzerland or something?
Well, Switzerland's a pretty good country. There are very few countries in the world that have succeeded in the same way as Switzerland has succeeded. And then look at Norway. Norway has also succeeded extraordinarily well. And my own country, Iceland, has recovered after a financial crisis earlier and more effectively than any other country in Europe. So it's very difficult to argue the case that you have to be within the European Union to be successful if you have Switzerland, Norway and Iceland all demonstrating that you can be extraordinarily successful on the outside.
So you think it would be a good thing the UK actually left the EU for the UK?
No. I've never offered countries opinions about the EU membership or not. If I was a president in a Baltic state, I would probably very much be in favor of a membership of the European Union. Okay?
Just one question about Iceland.
Yeah.
You plan to set up a national wealth fund with the money from oil discoveries. How big is the potential billions of dollars? Like
no, we are not so far along the road. What I mentioned was that now when we have issued permits to explore the possibility of oil in the Jan Mayen area between Iceland and Norway, it is sensible to look at the experience of Norway and other countries with respect to sovereign wealth funds. So if and when oil will be discovered, we will then be prepared and have already established the legal framework in order to make sure that the benefit of such a discovery would benefit the entire nation. So I think it is wise to start thinking about it, looking into the lessons of other countries, especially Norway. And I am very happy that the drilling in this area in the North Atlantic Ocean will be done in cooperation between Iceland and Norway and experienced international companies.
Thank you very much, sir.
Good.
President Grimson, thank you very much for talking to us today. First of all, there is one main story that a lot of people are interested in the UK, which is the question of the EU and the UK's relationship and whether there's going to be a referendum. What's your perception on this at the moment?
Well, I have always hesitated to give other countries recommendation, but it's quite clear, both in my country and other parts of Northern Europe, that there's a growing skepticism about the way the European Union is moving forward. And a reflection of that is what most people have not really put in context, that if you go through Northern Europe and you start with Greenland and you go through Iceland and the United Kingdom into Denmark, Norway and Sweden, it's not until you come to Finland in Northern Europe that you find a Euro country. Entire Northern Europe has opted for different reasons, each country, to stay outside of the Eurozone. And given the location of Britain and the historical place that Britain has had in Northern Europe, it's no surprise to me that there should be a growing skepticism when the countries on the European continent that have different traditions, different histories and a different vision seem to be moving in a more federal direction.
But you have a very interesting perspective on this, in that Iceland is moving closer to EU membership at the moment. I mean, although there was the kind of postponement.
Well, we have traditionally always had an overwhelming majority against the European Union membership, for reasons which are similar to why Norway has twice voted to stay outside. But when the banks collapsed, there was a period where people were saying maybe if we had been part of a bigger currency area, this disaster would not have happened. But as everybody knows, in the last 3 years, the Eurozone has revealed itself to be a different kind of animal than people were applauding 4 years ago. So now it has been decided in my country to take a pause in the negotiations, not to move forward in the coming months in any way whatsoever, and then revisit the issue sometime later.
But that's not just because of the election. There is a sense of needing to take stock of that decision.
It's both the reason because the political forces in my country line up in such a way. There's only one political party which advocates membership. But also, given all that has happened in just 3 years since we took that decision, the European Union today and the journey it seems to be taking towards the future is a very different structure than we faced 3 years ago. And given where Iceland is in the North Atlantic and part of the Arctic family of nations, if we look to our neighbor in the east, Norway, they have decided to stay outside. Greenland, our neighbor in the west, decided actually to leave the European Union. So where we are placed in the North Atlantic, and let's not forget that Britain is also a part of that family of North Atlantic nations, it is quite clear that the European Union has not been seen as the ticket to the future for the countries in the North Atlantic.
I mean, how long could that suspension of your, the process of joining the EU, how long could that last? Might that be an indefinite suspension? I mean, is anything?
Well, we will see. First of all, We want to show the European Union for the full respect. They have many of the leading nations been our close trading partners and political partners for a long time. But we don't want to drag the process on for long. So later this year we will face the decision whether we call the discussions off altogether, which some parties in my country are in fact advocating, or whether we prolong the pause that has now been created in the negotiations. I cannot see.
Those are both kind of either not joining or pausing for longer. I mean, is there a
Yes.
chance of joining?
I mean, there is no strong political force in my country arguing that we need to finish the negotiations quickly because we want to get into the European Union. Those who are advocating that we should go on with the negotiations, most of them are saying because we want to find out whether the European Union still sticks to its fisheries policy, which in our opinion has been a dismal failure, or whether the European Union is open to some kind of completely different management of the ocean resources which would fit the Icelandic sovereignty over our fishing grounds, because we will never surrender our sovereignty over our ocean resources.
Do you have a sense as to whether by the end of this term as president that Iceland would be an EU member or not?
Well, if you want me to take a bet, I would definitely say no.
I see. No, there's one other association a lot of people obviously in the UK will have with you, and that's over IceSave and the referendum. And what is the current state of play at the moment? There are still after kind of court rulings that yet to come.
Well, the state of play now is on two tracks. On the one track, the estate in the Icelandic bank, Landsbankinn, has already started to pay out to the British authorities and to the Dutch authorities enormous amount of money. And it is now clear that the assets within the failed bank are sufficiently strong to pay back to those who had deposits and the British authorities everything that can be reasonably required. In fact, they will probably be paying more than would have done if it had been done sort of immediately. The other track is that the EFTA court will on Monday issue its statement. It's important for people to realize that that statement will be an advisory view of the court. It will not lead to any financial obligations or transactions of any sort. It is more a kind of legalistic opinion within this process, but will by itself not lead to any financial responsibility or financial sort of transaction. But the interesting thing is this: the estate of the bank was sufficiently strong to pay back to Britain, whereas the Gordon Brown government decided, to its eternal shame, to put Iceland on the list of terrorist state and terrorist phenomena. We were there together with Al-Qaeda and the Taliban on the official list of the British government. And we have not forgotten that in Iceland. I mean, that action by the Gordon Brown government did us enormous damage, both economically and also in terms of our reputation. And if everybody had simply stayed cool, if Alistair Darling and Gordon Brown had stayed cool and not given in to the temptation to have their Falkland moment by using Iceland, and realized the estate within the bank was so strong, we would have been able to escape all this IceSave dispute between Iceland and Britain.
So you haven't forgiven Gordon Brown?
No. Gordon Brown will be long remembered in my country for centuries to come, long after he has been completely forgotten in Britain.